women in the workplace and their role and what they can do and what we can help support success for women in the workplace. The session today is sponsored, and thank you very much for that, by our sponsors for this whole day, Brio of the Learning Technology Summer Forum. Everything will be recorded, the slides, the chat, and so on, and they'll be available from next week at the Digital Hub. And I'll just put the link into the chat for that. And with that, Chloe, Atlanta, over to you.
Oh, thanks very much, Don, for the introduction. And welcome everybody from all over the world, which is always really exciting. So I'm Chloe, and I'm going to be introducing us, and then Atlanta and I will do a double act. First of all, statistics. I find it still quite disappointing, these numbers. Not quite disappointing, very disappointing. 500 global corporations that are responsible for $32 trillion worth of market value still only have 2.8% of their CEOs being female. That's just 14 women. And what's even more devastating is that 10 of those are in the US. So there's only 4 outside the US in terms of female leadership. And the stats go on. You know, 2/3 of all senior leadership in sort of FTSE 100 companies still go to men. So we need to start changing these numbers. They're changing slowly, but what we really want to do is to support each other, and we want to support our organisations in continuing to drive forward so that these numbers don't slip back. And this is sort of my absolute passion, and we are going to do it, by the way, all 164 of us that are online at the moment. Now, with my work with Hello Tomorrow, I get to meet some awesome leadership teams, leaders and female leaders. But recently I've been working with the Harlequins women's rugby team, and I think I've met some of the most truly inspirational women in this group of people. It's not just their physical strength and commitment to the sport and to the game, it's their unbelievable mental strength and resilience, both on and off the pitch, because all of the women work, they have jobs. And right now, a huge amount of them are frontline. So they are Met police officers, they are firefighters, they are doctors doing PhD research studies, they are social care, they're helping our supply chain. They also run businesses, and then they go and play elite rugby. So they are absolutely incredible. And today, I'm delighted to be joined with Atlanta, who I work closely with, who is their leader and a really, truly inspirational one. And she's really leading the way in female sport. And today we want to sort of take you through a stories-led and reflective session about the 3 key pillars that have led Quinns Harlequins, sorry, as a fan I call them Quinns, Harlequins, to be one of the real leading edge organisations in women's sport. And Atlanta, welcome, and you can start to tell us how you've done it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Fantastic to be here and to speak with everyone. Just to reassure the audience that I'm also sitting in some very cloudy weather, so I share your pain of not having much sunshine. But I'm actually at the Twickenham Stoop, our stadium today, hence my backdrop behind me. But yes, as Chloe's mentioned, Harlequins competes in the top domestic league in the country. We have about 15 to 20 internationals from around the world who play for this club, and it's been an incredibly exciting journey, and hence we wanted to speak to you about it today. Look, we've probably lived by 3 core principles. We've sort of been in existence for 5 years, which we'll get into a bit, but we've really come on a huge journey. And there's a huge mantra in women's sport right now that you can't be what you can't see, and I think that really applies to any organisation when we talk about female visibility. It's absolutely crucial that we're promoting, we're talking about, we're engaging with our female role models, our female leaders. What we want to do is create that cultural shift. It has to become the norm, and we're not here today to say it's all females empowering females. What should be sort of reflected and sort of acknowledged by everyone is that it doesn't matter what gender that person is. If they're the right leader and the best person for the position, they need to be able to lead the way. And you know, that hopefully that mantra can really be applied across business, across sport. We need to give visibility. The next key principle that we live by is ownership. We've got some incredibly strong values at Quinns. we're intent on leading the way. So we are very much a leader in rugby, but what's been instrumental is that we've dedicated ourselves to make sure that we keep leading the way in women's sport. So football, netball, cricket are all doing some fantastic things. Women's football is probably 5 to 10 years ahead of rugby right now, just because of the investment and the timelines they've been working to. But we don't want to just be the best in our field. We want to be the best in the women's sporting landscape. That takes a lot of bravery. That's a huge factor and a huge element of our conversation with you all today. And that comes from individuals and an organisation as a whole, and we're going to get into that, but it's absolutely something that no one needs to sit here going, well, I don't feel my organisation doesn't do that. We're here to talk to you about how, as an individual, how even a small collective can really start making change and doing some great things. And then the last one, probably even more so in the world we currently live in, is focus. You can't rest on your laurels. There's definitely no stopping. And for Harlequins, we will continue. Again, we'll get into it, but we're going to continue to try and lead the way. I certainly want to, from a personal perspective, and Chloe knows this well, I want to make a mark in the women's sporting landscape. Personally, that's incredibly important to me. I want to make sure that the work that we've done as a club and as a team is long in the memory, and it's exciting to be part of that. And now more than ever, we can't afford, with things going on in an incredibly tough and challenging environment, we can't afford to let things slip. It's going to take creativity, it's going to take thinking differently, but it's really important that we don't use things as an excuse, or with a lot of things, building up and pressures, are there ways that we can start to do things differently, but it's still going to cause really positive, great change.
That's amazing. Thanks, Atlanta. And Atlanta mentioned it a couple of times there. The word that I see all around the rugby pitch, and from the women, from the leadership team, from the support team as well, that support the whole infrastructure, if you like, of Harlequins team, is this word bravery. And the numbers, as we've just seen, are not great, and it will take bravery from all of us and support of each other and our organisations to really start to move this needle. And so the first question that I have for all of you, and Don, can you go to the poll, is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how brave are you feeling? So how brave?
Sorry, Chloe, I was going to say, please feel free to share your reflections on what that means to you in that column in the middle where it says share your reflections on the vote. So maybe put some ideas in here. Sorry, Chloe, to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. Kate, great comment. Even if you don't feel brave, pretend to do it anyway.
It's very interesting. Loretta's saying she feels more confident now she has her own business. It's very interesting and good for you.
Awesome, Loretta. There's some wonderful statistics out there about how many new businesses and entrepreneurs are now females, which is also great. I also, Sam, I love the idea of positivity. I think sometimes there's an awful sort of negativity attached to the numbers and what's not happening, but actually let's all have a go at making the change.
I think Keith's comment is an easy one. It's easy to be brave when it doesn't affect you. So talk is cheap, I suppose we could say. It certainly is. And I think that's why Amelia Earhart is my heroine, because she put her life on the line every time she went off in a plane.
I think there's some incredibly brave people. I'm loving these comments. Everyone's saying that they're very much stepping up to the plate here and absolutely prepared to kind of keep pushing things forward. It's fantastic.
Also, I have to acknowledge Helen's comment about, and I'm not going to get on this pedestal, but if Kanye West can run for president, then actually we're all capable of doing everything. So, or anything. I love it. Absolutely love it. And there's a lot of stuff in here actually that we are going to talk about. I feel brave but a long way from it. Inclusion and all the many words that are now coming up with and associated to women. And I have to just do a little shout out, because when Atlanta and I were discussing this, we sort of ping pong between diversity and women, and we're absolutely sticking to women. But I think anything that we are talking about today is about anybody who is underrepresented. I think it's exactly the same principle. So sort of take that as the intention, as well as we're talking about women, but it's for everybody out there.
Chloe, I just wanted to mention, sorry, very quickly, Chloe Waywell's made a great comment. She says, I think I work in a very traditional male-run organisation and I don't feel brave to change that ancient mindset. All I can say to that is just do it, Chloe. 100% understand where you're coming from, but from having grown a women's rugby programme in a very traditionally male sport, I can assure you that if you put your hand up and you want to lead the way, I guarantee it will work, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about that offline as well. But I think that's a fantastic comment to make.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the contact details for Chloe and Atlanta will be available at the end.
Amazing, thanks, Don. Right, so with risk of spending a huge amount of time getting carried away with all of your interesting facts, I'm also really pleased to see that we're 36% of us, if I'm reading that right, are feeling 4 out of 5. And 33 around 3 out of 5, and I think that's really exciting that we're on the higher end and not the lower end. So Don, can we go back to the presentation, please? And so what we're going to do as that starts up is we're going to launch into, like I say, the stories-led and reflective element of the 3 pillars. Atlanta's got all of the awesome stories, and I'm going to lead the reflection bit. So we will start with visibility.
So guys, as we said, we've got these 3 core pillars, and we wanted to just kind of convey to you what we've done here at Harlequins and hopefully give you a bit of insight to how we've done it. This picture here is, I'm afraid I'm featured in it, but this is one of our corporate lounges at the Stoop. On that back wall, hopefully for those who know rugby, that's Chris Robshaw, the former England captain and Harlequins captain. But what's fantastic is you've got Rachel Burford beside him, World Cup winner, our female captain. Just under the TV, which is not best placed, is Giada Franco, an Italian international, and on the end there is Danny Kerr, another England international, and some of the greats of rugby. For us, we had to be creative. Women's rugby is not a commercially sustainable sport yet, but we have thought differently. And my God, if you're going to put a sort of 10-foot poster up on the side of the wall at the Twickenham Stoop where we play our games, we've got an entire poster on the side of the whole building that's probably about 50 foot high with men and female players side by side. We've got frame shirts, we've got our social media handles sort of around pitchside branding. You walk in and there's life-size pictures on our sort of shop of our players. Harlequins is a 150-year-old club, and the women's team is just coming into its 5th year of inception. So we've very much followed a startup business model. We've on a massive rate of knots of evolution, of growth and development, and we had to move quickly to grab new audiences, make a mark, and make ourselves memorable. And from the banners to the coverage to the fact that we play the majority of our games at the Stoop, people walk in and absolutely know from the off, even without being sort of a die-hard rugby fan, that this is the home of Harlequins men and women. And that's huge. In our first year, we actually featured Rachel there, the blonde lady, in our kit launch, and just by chance the Telegraph were ranking the best kits in the men's premiership, and they made a passing comment in the Telegraph to say it was fantastic to see Harlequins women's featured in the club. We were the only one to do it side by side that year, and for the Telegraph that was a passing comment, but it made such a significant impact back here to know that what we were trying to do was actually working. And it's huge to give that prominence, that visibility. Even having these people in the room here on a women's match day, that didn't exist 4 to 5 years ago, but we're finding corporate audiences, they want to come and listen. The woman beside me, she's actually about 6'4", she's a PhD lecturer, one of our key players. Her nickname is Giant. She's more than happy with that name, but she's played for England. She's incredible. I'm actually giving a speech here to a host of men and women from the world of sport, from the world of business, and that comes down to product development. It's a fantastic, fun afternoon for them, but for us, it has been a product development asset. It's making sure people understand what women's rugby can offer, and what you're doing is creating that cultural shift. It's been long going on in men's rugby. Well, actually, we're proving to the point that it can happen in women's rugby, that people are engaged, they want to come and attend. And we've had some of the leading audiences in the league of thousands coming to watch at the Stoop, and these women are now playing in prime time premiership standard venues with thousands watching on, and that prominence, that visibility has made a significant impact. And once they come in, they tend to come again, as Chloe will talk about later. But we're growing our audiences and we're giving the visibility, and that's just absolutely key. And look, it's as simple as putting something on the wall, but we hope and we know that for organisations, are they actually giving that visibility to people within your business to recognise your female leaders and your female role models?
Absolutely, and I think visibility is a key thing, and you mentioned values as well. When I work with organisations, there's an awful lot going on for female leadership, which is fantastic, but sadly, an awful lot of it is as a side event. It's a network that is sort of a tick box activity, and it serves a purpose, and I'm not knocking anything that is happening because that's all positive. But as with Harlequins, across the board, it is part of the main event. So if you imagine incredibly male orientated organisation, the women are as big as the men on the walls. And it's really fascinating to think within your organisations, is it just lip service, or are there visible things around your organisation that can really, really make you start to feel like this is an action with intention from the head of the organisation because they preach about it and it's what you can see? So when we were discussing this session, we talked about getting it interactive for you rather than you guys just listening to us. And whilst we would love to answer all of your questions, and we will try our hardest to do a lot, what we decided to do was to pose you more reflective questions. So this first question is about, when you think about your own organisations, the stuff that they're doing or their approach to women in leadership and females generally, what actually stands out for you? So first of all, have a couple of seconds to think about it. If you want to share, absolutely do, because this is about sharing amongst yourself, but we might not be able to go through all of the things you talk about. So when you think about your organisation and its approach to women in leadership, what stands out for you? What's really visible? Also, you can start to ask yourself, what would you like to see more of? And Tom kicks straight in.
And Chloe, just to be clear, you're not. Sorry, I just want to jump in. Just to be clear, you're not necessarily asking for people to comment on this. This is a reflective question for people to consider for themselves. And I should have said at the beginning, I've admitted to, there will be 3 reflective questions in the course of this webinar. You can share if you want to, but it's really for people to think about for themselves, isn't it, Chloe?
Absolutely, and I think one of my passions is we don't give ourselves enough time to think about things in our very fast-moving lives. So this really is a think about what you see and also what you want to see more of.
And thank you for people who are choosing to share as well.
I would love to read comments. I'm going to notice a couple of things because I think they are very much key things. There's a very big, as Atlanta very clearly said, what you can't be what you can't see. So if there is no female leadership at the top, that is an instant challenge. There's also, I can see people talking about lip service. It's great to be talked about stuff, but I don't see a lot actually going on. There's also a real issue or a real challenge with types of roles fitting women, and therefore we've got women, but they're all in the soft things. And I'm not going to go there because I'm not going to get on that soapbox. But yes, it's another form of bias, about where women belong in organisations. So we will talk about some of these and hopefully explore some of the ways through the Harlequins that have addressed this. But really interesting comments, and I love it. I'm going to give you another couple of seconds because people are still typing and sharing, which is brilliant. The other thing that I also see come up is mindsets. Another thing that very much is a behaviour and a mindset, but the exciting thing is that can be changed. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you for your engagement. So what I'm going to do is move on now. So the next core principle is about ownership. And Atlanta, back to you.
Absolutely. So look, for us guys, as we mentioned, I think strong values are absolutely essential here, and you know, we made a decision to really lead the way, and that principle and that approach can really be taken away by anyone at any level. I truly believe that. You know, what Harlequins have done, and this is a great picture here, is, you know, you've got thousands watching, you've got the next generation lining the pitch as they run out, you know, with their mascot. There's about 5 internationals in that picture. You know, we make it a real day of celebration. Us deciding to lead the way has meant that we've got real buy-in and real engagement from external stakeholders, and I do think that's quite good. If you're putting your mark in the ground and deciding that you're going to lead the way and be an organisation that's known for its approach, then actually that's integral. And in women's sport, you've had the likes of Visa, Barclays, you've had the Women's Telegraph come and create its own women's sports section, and that visibility and that prominence in turn is driving, because clubs like Harlequins, sports like rugby, are putting their hand up to generate a whole new sporting landscape and new sports fans. You know, other elements that we've done, we've recognised the corporate field. It's fantastic to be talking today. We've actually created the Harlequins Business Academy, and for the first time ever, we've obviously been able to put our players, put our female leaders in front of corporate audiences, and that's not just diversity and inclusion, but the women offer a whole different element, different insights. You know, a lot of them balance full-time careers, and incredibly impressive ones at that, alongside their sporting demands, and that's a fresh new sort of insight and approach that corporate audiences are hearing for the first time, and you see that become more and more prevalent, particularly around women in leadership. And what we've spoken about is unapologetic leadership. I think someone commented, you know, about having the confidence to do it, and it is. You've got to have the passion, you've got to have the willingness to lead, and that's something certainly important to me. I'm going to do this. I'm pretty headstrong. I'm going to make sure that this works. And you acting as a champion, however sort of insignificant you might think it is, trust me that it's not. You being the voice, being the reason, you know, repeatedly putting your hand up and saying, we're going to do this and we're going to make change. And that's not to be disruptive. You know, it can be good disruption, but it's not meant to be in a negative way, that people will come on board, and it's how you create other advocates around you, other champions. It's actually going to keep driving, and we've seen that from the size of the crowds. You know, our first game we had 450 people. We now regularly attract over thousands. You know, with breaking UK records of 5,000 plus, which for the women's sport in general, not just rugby, is significant. You know, and I think we're in an era now, even before COVID, but you know, even more now, that if you don't go now, you will get left behind, and people remember what you do, particularly when times are tough. You know, personally, I'm driven by the mentality of go now or don't go at all. And that can be big, then that can be small. But if you don't go, if you don't embrace change, and you don't embrace the fact that there's this huge cultural shift, you know, we see it in sport, but there is women in leadership positions, women in business, you know, diversity and inclusion. It's so integral to the cultural shift happening globally across so many different facets, that I do think people will get left behind. You know, and as I said, it all ties back into, are you prepared to put your hand up and be that brave person? And it could be walking into your CEO's office, it could be your CEO leading the way, but don't underestimate the power of the individual and what you can do as a person to bring others on board and on your journey with you.
And I think I'm just going to pick up, whilst Atlanta was talking, a couple of themes and questions that I can see coming up. One of the really interesting questions, someone said, what's the male-female split like at a senior level in Harlequins? The one thing, and Atlanta, I'm actually going to take this question for you. One of the thing that I love about the Harlequins is the owner of the club is passionate about women. And I think not all organisations will have that absolute gift of someone in the most senior table having that passion, but you do need to have someone with a voice at the table to be supporting your cause. And I think this is where allies come in, and where your support comes in. About, it's broader than just a numbers game. This is about diversity of thought at the decision-making table. This is about success of organisations to be inclusive with their leadership. This is such a broader subject than just numbers of men and women. And there's huge amounts of statistics and research now put out there that you know, businesses perform better with a woman's voice in the mix. So wherever that's coming from, whichever level, and you know, where in your organisation, especially the male-dominated ones, it's still very important to have someone support you and own it with you at the top. And so if we're going to move these numbers and move the needles, it's not all right to fight, if you like, from underneath. It's to be represented at the top and supported at the top. So again, giving you a couple of seconds, maybe a minute, to think about the next question, the next reflective question. So who within your organisation, and even at an industry level, are your key allies? Who helps you own these numbers? And the sort of the sub-question to that, the sub-reflection is, who actually is the one that's celebrating, communicating your success stories? That's essential in this process of it links to the visibility as well, but who's out there banging the drum for you and at the top of the organisation, making sure you have a voice at the table? I'm just going to leave that with you.
So I'll just pick up. So Joe has asked a question around the makeup of Quinns, which I know you've touched on. But yeah, I think internally, in particular on the business side, we've also got the men and the female, male and female teams, which obviously are part of the numbers that we have. But yeah, you know, it's a very, very equal office that we work here, particularly based out of the Stoop. And actually, our senior management team is predominantly female. But what I would say is that I have had some incredible male champions. As Chloe's touched on, look, our owner was the one who said, this is not only, it's not a commercial decision, it's the right thing to do. We've been based off a very family-friendly demographic. We're based in Southwest London. We regularly attract families to the Stoop, and actually he was the one that led the way. You know, even his wife, who's not officially involved in the club, everyone has been a champion. DHL, our principal's partner, again, the CEO and his wife, absolute advocates of what we're trying to do here, and there's been some great male role models and advocates who went, we need to run with this. And actually that's why gender doesn't become even a thing, is because they truly believed in it. And I think that's a lot of what we need to reach, is that people, we're not talking about gender at that point, we're talking about people going, we believe in this, we believe it as a project, and we're going to make this happen, regardless of what organisation that we're talking about at this point.
And also, just before we move on, I can see a lot of sort of comments coming up as well about this. There's an age-old, if you're female and you're a leader, you've got to be some sort of ballsy, male characteristic, you know, hard-hitting. I disagree with that. I think there are different types of cultures in organisations where your behaviour will need to be different depending on the culture. But I've met some awesome female leaders who aren't, I'm going to say it, but bitches at all. They're just very strong people with strong visibility and brilliant support networks around them from both, you know, men and women. But it is an absolute challenge. Right, I'm going to move on. Thanks again for all your brilliant comments. Don, I'm hoping that we get to actually go through these afterwards and have a good read, but I will leave that with you.
All of the chat, the session itself and the slides are all recorded, and yes, they'll be available for you and also for everybody else to look at the digital hub later on. Sorry, I put a link in there saying the session's now ending. That's not the case. The link I meant sorry, the link I meant to put in was this one, saying, look, the recording and everything will be available later on. There you go. Okay.
We're not over yet, Don, just yet. Right, actually on to focus, Atlanta.
Absolutely, and I'll start off saying this is my favourite picture. I've actually been at Harlequins for 5 years, so the whole length of time the women's teams existed. So this is Twickenham Stadium, the national stadium in England. It holds 80,000 people. So every year Harlequins play their big game series, which for 12 years strong has sold the stadium out. They led the way in men's rugby around creating this kind of family-friendly, huge Christmas event every year in December. And for the first time ever this past Christmas, the women played alongside the men, so we had a huge double header. And while the lights are out there, there's actually close to 8,000 people, which again is with another record-breaking attendance. The fact the screens are on, the pyrotechnics are out. We played Leinster, who flew over from Ireland for the first time ever. We certainly broke some barriers that day, and it meant a huge amount to our players. It was probably the first club-level game in 18 years, and the first time that Harlequins as a female team had ever played at Twickenham, which was just fantastic. And even 12 to 18 months ago, this kind of thing wouldn't have happened. And actually, the story behind is that I was excited, but I was certainly hesitant to do this because we didn't have much time to pull it together. And my male CEO was the one to say, "We're doing this. Come on, Atlanta. I know you want this to happen, and this is going to be incredible." And he championed it, and he got me on board. And I'm so glad that he did. And it's an example of how we've pushed the standards. We've set new expectations. You know, now I've got 30 players asking me when they're next playing at Twickenham. You know, it's now not going to be an exception. They want it to be normality. The same in women's football. They've played, you know, they've had a women's Super League football weekend. They were playing in the likes of the Etihad and Tottenham's new stadium. They've attracted 30,000 plus to games to show the audiences, to show the change and the progression that's happening. And there's a lot of negativity to say people aren't interested in women's sport, or that time and again is being proved wrong. From millions watching, I think it was 11.6 watched the England women's football team at the last World Cup. I mean, there's no hiding behind those numbers, and that's where broadcasters, sponsors, you know, the press, the TV, they're all getting involved because these numbers are starting to change. And for me, particularly as we touched on, in a COVID world, now's the time not to stop. I'm not saying it's going to be the same. I think we can certainly all acknowledge that, but be creative, think differently, and actually, as I said before, those who stand by this and put their hand up and say, I'm going to continue to do this, I'm going to continue to support, it might be your female leadership development programs, it might be you're a mentor, it might be a mentoring program for a number of people. You know, the excuse of going, we need to cut that, it's an easy cut, just can't happen. And it's kind of having that fundamental principle of going, we're going to continue to do this, and it may be different, but my God, we're going to keep pushing forward.
Mm-hmm. And I absolutely love that sentiment is about, you know, striving for change. And we were talking about, we were going to mess around with, you know, this is a long-term plan. This isn't just one single game. I'll share something very quickly with you, which is me and my children were at that match to watch the team, the women's team. I have 2 teenage boys who both play rugby. Their comments were that this was a better game of rugby than the men's. Yay. It also led us to then go and watch the England-Wales female international, and in our house watching women's rugby is normal. We're just going to another rugby game. A very small but noticeable point in that game that I mentioned to Atlanta when we met, and half of me thought it was just a bit of luck, but then now knowing Atlanta, it wasn't luck at all. It is a very clear vision. Is that a guy called Marcus Smith handed the ball to the female team, to the women's Harlequin team. Now, Marcus Smith is the sort of highest paid junior who plays for the men's team and is 18, am I right, Atlanta? Young, anyway.
Yeah.
And my boys adore him. So when he came on the pitch to hand the ball to the women, the significance was immense. And it's those sorts of little small things, going back to the visibility and the ownership. It's not the big things that make the impact. It's what we see and what we then can feel attached to and become engaged by make all of those little changes so much bigger. So that connection that my boys had with Marcus Smith and then the women's game, so subtle but so important, and it really resonated with me. And when I take that right back into organisations and I look at all of your wonderful comments out there about, you know, some have great leaders, some don't, some find it really challenging, you've got male-dominated environments, different industries. This is all about those small steps and not stopping. COVID's come along, and I think there's a huge amount, well, I know there's a huge amount of women out there struggling to now also run homes and look after children and do their jobs in the lockdown, and it's tough. And I'd be fascinated to see, under stress, your leadership teams, the choices they're now making based on their values, based on their behaviours, based on the culture of your organisation. Are the organisations stepping up to really grab this right now is as important as ever? Or are they using excuses just to park? Let's do that next year. Well, women still exist today, and this isn't going to sort of go away, so we need to be doing things now. So making female leadership visible across your organisations, your homes, really finding out those key sponsors, the people that are going to bang the drum for you and be supportive of you and really drive the message home, and continuing the conversations about this is important today and in the future. This isn't something that can be parked. So what we want to do is all work together to do the little things and plan for the big, to really change the numbers and really move the needle on this statistic. And I'm going to ask you now, Don, can you open back up the poll to really ask you, how brave are you feeling now?
And just to make the point, we've got 9 minutes to go.
That's amazing. As people start to do the poll, Don, we're happy to take, I don't know if you can go to questions whilst the poll's open, but thank you everybody for all of your comments. There's so much there, but any questions, please feel free to put them in there.
Well, let's keep the poll open, and I can raise with you some of the questions that have come up while the poll is still running. Of course, people can still share their reflections on their vote here as well. Advocacy and allies got a key mention here from both Andrew Jacobs and Sandrine, both asking the questions around the same thing. How can individuals become effective allies? So how can they do that? Alanta, Chloe.
I think that from my side, and it's something I said to Chloe before, I live by the mantra of I'm going to be relentless. You know, it's not, doesn't mean that every day that you're going 100 miles an hour, but it isn't, don't underestimate, as I said, what you can do. You know, you can positively challenge, you know, you can say, I think a lot of the time in organizations, they're not quite sure how to start. You know, if someone came to the table and said, you know, I want to see this positive change, I feel like an empowered female within this business, or I think we need to change the dynamics within this organization, how can I help? You know, a lot of the time just offering that help and being prepared to kind of be part of that working group to see what programs can be put in place, be it with your HR, with your senior leaders, I think that will go a long way. And look, in terms of being an advocate and an ally, look, from an example of sport, I was talking about it yesterday actually, you know, share it, give it the visibility. So, you know, you might say Harlequins tweet, share it, talk about it, follow a female athlete, but actually that applies to business too. Are you following things on LinkedIn? Are you talking about it on your Twitter feed? That's not rocket science, and I know it sounds really simple, but it's that conversational piece, it's the eyeballs. You know, a great example for us is when we put out our match artwork on our Harlequins channels, whilst we're the leading female rugby team, we've only probably got 10 to 15,000 people on social media. When I ask 60 of my players to then push it out on their social media, suddenly our eyeballs, our visibility absolutely goes crazy, because we've clearly got into more people's social media sort of channels and all the algorithms around following athletes. So, you know, talk about it, just keep mentioning it and keep giving it the promotion that it deserves.
And I think
promote it, and people will come along with you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chloe.
No, I was just going to say there's a real practical level here as well, which is start a conversation with one person. And I think the other thing is within your organisations or wherever you're thinking about, you don't have to have all the solutions yourself. There is a group of people there that are making assumptions about what it's like to be women in your organisation, and they're making assumptions about the right actions to take. Start a conversation one-to-one to enable people to learn from each other and stay curious, to then develop what needs to happen based on the relationship and the understanding rather than assumptions.
Just want to give a shout out to some of the reflections about the bravery. I noticed the dial has moved. People seem to be feeling braver.
Woohoo!
We've got a general shift from 3 to 4. Yay. Sam, Andrew, Aislinn, Evie, I think, right, all talking about things here, about, I think, positive things that can happen in the future. And the need to be brave going future. Andrew Jacobs very practically saying, men amongst us, we need to make sure that women are represented. So if you're asked to speak at an event and you're on a panel, don't speak on a manel, which of course is an all-male panel. Make sure that there are women on there as well. So, so that's great. Now, I'm just going to follow up very quickly. Ainara says, how do we get more men allies? Very quickly, Chloe.
I think that's absolutely key. I think there's an awful lot of men out there that want to help and don't know how. I still go back to it's about the conversation. I'd also go back to think about what is it that you want from them. Is it a, could you give me the space to speak in a meeting? Is it a, would you sit and listen to some of my ideas? Is it just a, can you celebrate some of mine and my team's stories publicly? This group of women have done this amazing thing. So almost have an ask list. Would you be prepared to, you know, write an ask? I don't know, but it's thinking about your wants and needs and saying, and not being afraid to ask. I think a lot of the bias that exists in organisations is obviously unconscious, that's the whole reason, but also the bias is because we make up our own assumptions about things when we don't have the information. Give them the information.
I think, and Chloe, to your point as well, is if you're a young female or you're a female within your organisation who wants a mentor or an ally, you don't automatically have to think, I need to go and find another female. I think a lot of the time it's the misconception, or maybe there's some nervousness from male leaders to offer their services, and actually go and speak to them, because that will open so many doors and perhaps start to change that cultural shift and that thinking, going, I never realised what I could do. I had an analogy yesterday that if David Beckham retweeted something about women's football, my God, a lot of people are going to see it. It's the same principle. They might just not realise what they could do for you, and that's a huge brave statement to go knock on the door or send an email. But I truly believe, and as you said, there are a lot of people out there who want to help, and just reach out to them. That's the brave first step in itself, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I'm just going to move to the Q&A panel, and then I think very soon we'll be going to the wrap up. I just wanted to get to this panel here, so we've got the questions on display. I've been collecting the questions into a thematic way. We have got way too many to answer. Chloe, Atlanta, are you happy to pick up some of these questions afterwards with the through LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Absolutely,
yeah, we intend on doing a follow-up. I think Atlanta and I are both passionate about women in leadership. I think there's also very specific hurdles for women, which organisations need to be aware of. It's not leadership in the broader sense is different for men and women, but there is a place for both. And I did see it in the notes earlier. Women don't need to pretend to be men to be good leaders. Women need to be women and have their place and their position respected and valued. So we can share all sorts of things like that about barriers and about mentoring and about reverse mentoring.
I just want to quickly wrap up some of the audience reaction here. That was a very strong theme that came through: women supporting women's stereotypes. Emma, Becky, Jessica, Aislinn, Diana, and Dani all had stories to tell about that. Appearance. Cecilia was really annoyed about people making comments about her appearance at work, especially men and women. She said, and Kate said they could just keep their ideas and opinions to themselves. And I want to give a couple of shout outs. Andrew made the point that being non-sexist isn't enough. You have to be actively anti-sexist. The word juggle came up. Kate, Manisha, Jana, all saying it's a juggling act. It shouldn't be. Why do women have to juggle? Men don't, typically. I'm going to just ask, are there any, because we're getting close to the end now, it's 1.5 minutes to go. Any last comments that you want to make, Atlanta, Chloe, before we wrap?
Chloe, do.
I'm going to start. I think COVID has been a massive opportunity, actually, for an awful lot of couples, parents, families, individuals to really appreciate what the other person does. I know my husband now knows how annoying our teenagers are all the time. So some of this stuff, it's properly time for change right now. It's properly time to appreciate each other. And my sort of parting piece is, it is small pieces, movements all of the time, but building connections all of that time to make a difference. I don't think we should try and do it on our own. I think we should try and do it more together.
Yeah, and I think, my closing thing would be, look, we're in a new world more than ever. We're never going to probably go through this, or I hope we don't go through something like this again. And if you're not going to do it now, when will you? So it's going back to that mantra of go now or don't go at all. So hopefully we've kind of made you all feel a bit braver, and you feel like you've got some takeaways, and we'd love to continue talking to you on LinkedIn and Twitter and things. And just a huge thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you from me as well.
No, thank you both. Thank you both for your contribution and participation. A really nicely constructed, well-led discussion with practical stuff and inspiration as well. The practice and the inspiration together. Our thanks go to our sponsors today, Brio, who are sponsoring all 5 of the sessions today, making it possible to bring things to you today. Yes, they are brilliant, aren't they, Lorraine? I agree. And inspiring. I'm always annoyed when we can't answer all the questions, but you know what? We don't stop here. I say it's the end of a presentation, the beginning of a conversation. See what I did there? So Chloe and Anta will be coming to you live on LinkedIn. Their links are there in that page, in that drop down in the middle of the page. All right, I'm going to leave this up for just like 30 seconds. And then we have to close because we have another session to get to. Got to get the room ready. Once more, thanks everybody in the room for everything you brought to the session today. And thanks to Chloe Walton and to Atlanta St. John for talking to us about how we can all change the game for women in the workplace. Thank you.
And see you at the stoop.
Yeah. Exactly. See you for a game soon, guys. Thank you and take care.
Thank you.